So I'm hearing rumours, and I'm trying to find this Joe Rogan episode, and I can't find the clip, but I'm seeing a lot of journalism that is telling me that Joe Rogan has come out and said that GSP would have problems against a fighter like Masvidal, and that he thinks Masvidal could basically beat him. This is one of the worst takes I have ever heard from Joe Rogan or from anyone. It's one of the worst UFC takes I've ever heard in my life. Now, I thought DMT was meant to give you mental clarity, but clearly it's not working. Now, Joe Rogan, super popular guy, commentator for the UFC. He has the biggest podcast in the world. No doubt a very talented and hardworking man. However, there are some things he has said in the past which for me have been extremely bad takes, and people are acting like this is the first one. It really isn't. For example, Joe Rogan said that Ronda Rousey could beat 50% of the bantamweight men's division. I don't even have to say anything to that, do I? He also had a podcast episode with Steve-O from Jackass, and he was talking about Pereira versus Adesanya, and he would not shut up about how well Adesanya took the loss, talking about how he took it like a king. He came in with this fur jacket on, he looked like a king, he sat down and he accepted the loss. He said, you know, Pereira got the better of me, which was total rubbish, absolute rubbish. The guy that did the best video on that is MMA Guru. If you watch his full breakdown of it, he clearly shows that Joe Rogan's take on that was completely wrong. Adesanya didn't take that loss well at all. You know, he was making excuses the whole time. It's not what this video is concentrated about, but if you want to see a good video breaking down how Adesanya didn't take the loss well and how Joe Rogan's opinion on it was very biased and wasn't true, watch MMA Guru's video on it. It's brilliant. But back to the main topic of Masvidal causing problems for GSP. I mean, now what doesn't make sense to me here is that around a year ago, Joe Rogan had GSP on his podcast and was entertaining the idea of him coming back and fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov. But then he's saying that Masvidal would cause him problems. See, if I was a good friend and my mate was on a podcast with me, who was a fellow fighter, and I thought that they would get beaten up by Jorge Masvidal, I certainly wouldn't be entertaining the idea of them coming back to fight Khabib. So, can you see how this all doesn't add up for me? So if we analyse Masvidal, whose only way to beat Colby Covington was to hide with a balaclava on behind a restaurant and sucker punch him in the face, he is a journeyman, in my opinion. An entertaining fighter and a draw, for sure. But when you look at his body of work, for me, he is a journeyman. It's the same with Nate Diaz, for example. A journeyman, but a good fighter and a draw. I love Nate Diaz. I think he's great. Every time he fights, I watch. But if we look at it in reality, he is a journeyman. A fighter who hasn't won. I can't remember the last time he fucking won. A guy who knocked out Ben Askren with arguably one of the best knockouts ever, and then fought Nate Diaz for a fake belt. That belt was fucking pathetic. And then hasn't won since. He hasn't won since he fought Nate Diaz. Now, if we look at the fighters who Masvidal had the most trouble against, if I could build a fighter to fight Masvidal, it literally would be GSP. A guy that would take him down, hold him down, ground and pound him, and maybe submit him. GSP is the perfect build to beat Masvidal. So to say that Masvidal would give problems to GSP makes no sense. I just think that this is one of those takes where I think everyone understands. I hope you guys, if you don't agree with me, you don't agree with 99% of MMA fans, which means you're thick. It's just that bad of a take. GSP, 13 wins in a row. You know, one of the most popular fighters of all time. Beat Michael Bisping, beat numerous good fighters. Created a legacy. is arguably up there with the GOATs of the sport. If you look at all the stats, I mean, I've looked at all the stats. He's got better takedown accuracy than Jorge Masvidal, better takedown defense, better striking accuracy. All the stats go towards GSP, obviously. He's been smoking. Well, yeah, he has been smoking. It's Joe Rogan. But my problem with this is that if you are analysing GSP for who he is, you can't just focus on his opponents. GSP couldn't control the level of his opponents. That was not within the realms of his control. What he had control over was his skill, was his technique, was his ground game, was his takedowns. And I think he showed how good he was and showed us. I didn't think he'd ever have to prove that he was better than Masvidal, but I think he proved it through fighting some great fights, through using some great takedowns, great techniques, great striking, and just for being an absolute legend. Everyone that I've heard on a podcast or on an interview has always said that when they wrestled or trained with GSP, he was just the best. He blew them out of the water. There was one with Chael Sonnen where he was just describing how GSP would take ages doing one technique, and his training wasn't intense. He used these different training methods and, revolutionized the game. And he was doing this drill with Chael Sonnen. I think it was a choke or something on the ground. It might have been a guard pass. But he was just amazed at the detail that GSP was using. And the hand strength, I remember him describing the hand strength being super strong. And he literally says it in his latest video. GSP was the best. GSP was the best. And Chael Sonnen's been in there with some of the best fighters. He's obviously the GOAT, Chael Sonnen, no doubt, by the way. If Chael Sonnen says that he's been on the mat with GSP and that he's the best after rolling with him, you got to think, Chael Sonnen's been in there with the best fighters ever. He's fought John Jones, other countless fighters. I'm knackered, so I can't really think of the names right now. But if Chael Sonnen says he's the best after rolling on the ground with him, training with him, sparring with him, and he's fought some of the greatest of all time, that's good enough for me.